Okay, let's do predictions for the six Sweden major playoffs. So there are 8 teams remaining. So we have quarterfinals, semifinals, and a grand final to play. It's all going to be best 2 out of 3s, except for the grand final, which will be best 3 out of 5. And before we actually look at the bracket itself, let's just take a look at the schedule. So November 12th, 13th, 14th, this is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The stream starts at 9 a.m. Central European time. And I don't know what they do for the first hour, just introductions and whatever. But tentatively, Damon Kia versus Sandbox should be starting at 10 a.m. Central European time. And that is 4 a.m. Eastern and 1 a.m. Pacific. They scheduled this one first, very mindfully of them, at this time so that it'd be easiest for the Koreans to watch their teams play and for APAC in general, I guess, to watch their teams play. And then the next game we have at 1:30 p.m. Central European time. We have Team 1 versus Rogue. That is, I think, 7:30 Eastern and 4:30 a.m. Pacific. Then we have FaZe versus BDS at 5 Central European. And that would be, I guess, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. And finally, we have Ninjas in Pajamas versus Space Station. And they put this one last so that I guess NA fans can watch Space Station play, and then also it's a favorable time for LATAM because they're on, similar time zones to NA. But of course, these teams are also from LATAM, but they're playing against European teams, so it makes sense to put them in the middle. And again, Space Station the only NA team, so put it at the best time for Americans, I guess, for NA people. And that'll be at 2:30 p.m. Eastern and 11:30 Pacific. Okay, and then on November 13th, we'll have the stream starting at 4 p.m. Central European, and then again, if you want to convert these other ones yourself, it's just roll back 6 hours for Eastern time and roll back 9 hours for Pacific. Semifinals here at 4:30 and at 8 p.m. the second semifinal game, and then over here the stream starts here 5:10 p.m. special segment. I guess it's going to be for Rainbow Six Extraction based on this, whatever. And then shortly after that, at 5:30 p.m. Central European time, 11:30 Eastern, and 8:30 a.m. Pacific, we will see the grand final. Okay, so let's go over to the bracket itself now. There we go. So quarterfinals, we have Ninjas in Pajamas versus Space Station. I'm gonna do these in the order that they are presented on the other one, so not in the order here. The first game is Damon Gaming Kia versus Sandbox Gaming. So these are the 2 APAC teams. So this guarantees we'll see an APAC team in the semifinals. We'll see a Korean team in the semifinals since they're both Korean teams. So it's cool in that way, but also it is a regional team kill, the only one that will be happening in the quarterfinals. So a bit unfortunate, but also fortunate in the way that, yeah, it secures one of them into the semifinals. So win-loss scenario. Who's going to win this? I think the first 2 games are pretty easy to predict. I think most people are going to predict the same thing I predict. Damon Kia just looked better than Sandbox did. Of course, they're in different groups, playing different people under different circumstances and stuff, but Damon topped Group D, which was arguably the strongest group, the most competitive group. And again, at first place, they beat Space Station twice. They beat, I think, Empire and Furia, but they went 1-1 against both of them or one of them. I'm not 100%. But Sandbox, they even had to just win on a tiebreaker to make it out. They were on the same number of points as Vitality, but Vitality had a losing head-to-head to Sandbox, so it was Sandbox that qualified. And yeah, it's just easy to pick the first seed here. I'd like to see Damon, maybe win the whole event, but in the grand finals, they just are very exciting to watch. They're a really strong team, and they play in really flashy ways. Some of their players do, especially in particular. So yeah, I'm going to go with Damon Gaming. Pretty easy predict there. The second game of the day is Team 1 versus Rogue. I think this one's also, easy to call. Maybe there will be an upset, but I do think the heavy favorite here is Team 1. They just look better in the groups than Rogue. They had, I think, a better regular season than Rogue in their region, in a stronger region. Rogue coming in as the 4th seed from Europe. Team 1 coming in as the 2nd seed from LATAM, just behind FaZe. And yeah, Rogue had some interesting struggles. They went 1-1 with FaZe, which is good, but they also went 1-1 with Oxygen for some reason, both in overtime, which is curious. So it looked like certainly those games should have gone better for Rogue, it seems. And if they had, I would probably be thinking more highly of Rogue now. But considering how things went, I'm going to go with Team 1. They are the reigning major champions, and they have all those other attributes I just described before. So I'll go with them. And again, I think almost everybody's going to pick those. And in both cases, they're the first seeds being picked. So, easy picks. Third game of the day, Bds Clan versus BDS. And I think this is probably the hardest one of the day to call. And the other one that I haven't done yet is also pretty tough, but I do think this is the hardest one. So these two teams are very similar in terms of their dominance over the region, I guess. BDS and FaZe, both the first seeds from their respective regions, FaZe from LATAM, BDS from Europe. And it's kind of similar number of points. BDS didn't drop a game in Europe, which I didn't even realize until I just looked at it a minute ago. I thought they dropped a game or two, but no, they got taken to overtime twice, but they never lost. So they won all 9 of their games. And they got 25 of the available 27 points. Very impressive. Bds Clan struggled a little bit more in their region. They, I think, got 5 wins, 5 regular wins, 2 overtime wins, and 2 overtime losses. So 2 losses to BDS's no losses, but they were both tight games. They lost to Santos, however you say it, in their first game of the season. So I think maybe if they played them later, probably they would have won. Like, they were just getting a little bit more established. And it was a close-ish game. It was 8-6 overtime. So I think people had their doubts about FaZe after that. But they didn't lose again until their very last game of the season. So they went to overtime and beat both Liquid and Team 1, I believe. And then in their very last game of the regular season, they went all 15 rounds versus Furia but lost. And at that point, I'm not sure if Furia needed those points to qualify or anything, but FaZe certainly didn't. So at the end of the season, they weren't playing for much. They were already easily qualified for Copa Elite 6, so it didn't really matter. But of course, you want to win still. And so, yeah, took the 2 losses. But you could also say that Latin America, is just a stronger region at the moment than Europe. So maybe you could put their performances on like similar tiers. But if you want to ignore the skill level and just look at the numbers, then yeah, BDS did better. And then looking at their groups, I think I have a slide for this, right? Yeah. So let's look at their performances in the groups here. Right. So FaZe was in Group A and BDS was in Group C. So you could see right off the bat, BDS got 14 points, FaZe got 15 points. So really close. If BDS had just won this one game in regulation instead of in overtime, they'd be on the same number of points. They'd both be 5 regulation wins, 1 regulation loss. And you'll notice that they both won 40 rounds, but FaZe just lost 10 fewer rounds. So similar in a lot of ways, both 5-1 overall, and then both 40 wins, both quite a lot of points, but BDS had one team above them. And okay, so now let's sort of compare the quality of the groups. I think you'd probably say Group C, in hindsight, was the stronger group. Comparing the bottom 2 teams, so Oxygen and Invictus were both the bottom teams, and they both got 3 points. And they both had a similar situation where one of their players could not attend, so they had to sub somebody in. And Invictus lost a arguably less important player. It was not their IGL like it was for Oxygen, and their sub seemed to do a lot better. Gig played very well, all things considered. But in the end, it just got them on the same number of points. And they both went 1-5, but Oxygen just had 2 overtime games, and Invictus had none. Invictus did have 1 close game against Ninjas and Pajamas, however. So I think at the end of the day, I'd probably say Invictus was stronger than Oxygen, although Oxygen was more heavily crippled, and also they didn't seem to be playing at 100% capacity, even for what their given situation was. So it seemed like they were messing around a little bit. And Invictus might have been a little bit too. They seemed to be taking the situation fairly lightly. So yeah, I'd probably say Invictus was better. Sonics versus Chiefs, I think it's tough to call. Of course, Chiefs did get 3 more points than Sonics did, but I think this one, it's just apples and oranges here. In terms of round counts, like -13 versus -12 is very close. So Chiefs took more devastating losses, but they still just got more points. I'm just going to call it a wash. I can't call who was better. I want to say Sonics, but it goes against intuition, sort of, right? So whatever, we'll just call that equal. And then the last member of the group besides them, of course, so we're looking at, we're looking at Rogue, and we're looking at NIP. And of course, look, NIP definitely did better. They got more points. They only lost 1 game. They didn't even get taken to overtime. Rogue went overtime 3 times, 2 of them against Oxygen, and just and all things considered, of course, BDS end up they are the second seed and FaZe is the first seed of their respective groups. So that means BDS had to play against a team that ended up in first seed. So, okay. Given that their results were pretty similar and yeah, just okay. Right. I talked enough about that. So I think it's very tough to call based on this as well, because BDS did a little bit worse, but they were also seemingly in a little bit tougher of a group. So also tricky. So let's look at maps. I guess I got these slides ready before, but I didn't actually look at them. So this is maps for FaZe, and of course these are results from the past 3 months. So they have 100% win rate on 4 of these maps, and only 1 losing win rate on. They were quite bad at Oregon apparently. 2 out of 5 wins, 3 out of 5 losses, and they lost 1 coastline and they lost 1 cafe. So they've only lost 5 maps rather, I guess, in the last 3 months. And do keep in mind, LATAM does have a little bit different system than Europe. They both play the group stages normally, but then the points are set up differently. And then LATAM goes on to play the Copa Elite Six to determine who goes to the major. And for Europe, it's just whoever's in the top 4 of the round robin point thing. So FaZe played additional games, and they do a little group thing, and then they do a little playoff thing. And FaZe did get first place in the Copa Elite Six. So let's look at the BDS maps here. Numbers are a little bit different here. We see 3 100% win rates as opposed to the 4 that FaZe had, but we see no losing, no negative win rates or sub 50% win rates, I suppose. The worst one, also Oregon for them. So doubtful that we'll be seeing the map, although maybe BDS thinks that FaZe is substantially worse than they are in Oregon, so maybe we will see it, but I imagine one of them will ban it out. Just for comfort purposes. So 1 loss on Oregon, 1 loss on Cafe, 1 loss on Chalet, 1 loss on Consulate, and what would this be, like 2 losses on Coastline? So I guess just more losses, sheer number of losses, but you also have to account for, I believe 3 months ago would this include the Mexico Major? I'm assuming it would. So, potentially higher quality competition for BDS because they were at the Mexico Major and FaZe wasn't. So, and again, so I hope I'm not incorrect here, but this seems like too many maps for just stage 3 of EUL. So I'm gonna assume this Mexico Major. So BDS played Mexico Major and FaZe played Copa Elite 6, and maybe there's like a couple other games in there, but I don't think so. Okay, so again, like this is very hard to call. Like, I guess let's just flip back and forth. So let's compare their coastlines, I guess. So BDS, I mean, just higher percentage. They played it a lot more, and they have a higher win percentage, so I guess I give them favor there. And then Bank, have these guys even? Yeah, so they're both 100% on Bank. BDS have played it more. And yeah, this is tricky. I wish this like said the team, but this is BDS. I'll just try to keep reminding as I flip back and forth. And then Clubhouse, 100% for BDS, and 100% for for FaZe. And then Cafe, 75% both, and then I did Coastline already. Chalet, 100%. So I guess FaZe it has been more successful on Chalet. Consulate doesn't matter; it's not in the pool anymore. Villa, both 100%, but again, this is FaZe. FaZe has played it more, and Cafe. Or did I miss a map? I think I did all of them, right? Okay, so so at this point, the stats I think are just like too tough to call. They seem evenly matched, and then where you can see a noticeable advantage in the numbers, it still comes down to it's still subjective because they're not measured in the same way exactly. Like they're playing against different people under different circumstances and whatnot. So let's go back to the bracket. So with all of that being said, I was hoping that when I looked at the maps, I would actually make me make a decision. And this is tough. I initially thought I was gonna go with FaZe, and will I go with FaZe? I might go with BDS. Man, this is tough. I was gonna go with FaZe. I think I'm just gonna go with BDS. Like it's too difficult to call. It could go either way, and while I don't have anything against BDS, I just generally root against them in EU because I mean for like the non-NA regions, I'm usually just rooting against like the top teams, just root for the underdogs and whatnot. So, but in this case, I guess they're both the top dogs of their region at the moment. BDS didn't miss out on Mexico. They looked about the same as FaZe stat-wise. I guess I'll go with BDS, I suppose, if for no other reason than to have equal representation in the semifinals. Because I already picked I picked a LATAM team. I picked an APAC team, of course, and so I'll pick a European team. And so I wonder what he's gonna pick in the last one. All right. Final game of the day, Space Station Gaming versus Ninja in Pajamas. And why did I read Space Station first when they're on the bottom? You know why. Yeah, I got to go with Space Station. And I think there's arguments for both here. Space Station had their struggles in their group. Like, it seemed like maybe if they were going to make a deep run into playoffs, they would have performed better in their group. But they did have a tough group. And they did seem a little bit shaky. Like they were off just a little bit. They were monstrously clutch. Like they had so many clutches. Their team, I believe, had the most clutches of any team. And I mean, they probably had they perhaps had the most opportunities to do so, like reasonable opportunities to do so. And then also they won in situations that were not reasonable to win. So they mega clutch. And Ninjas in Pajamas also look good. Of course, when I looked at the groups, you saw that they were the first seed for their group, Space Station coming in at the second seed for their group. But I think by far Group D looked like the most competitive group. And let me just glance back at the groups really quick. So again, Group D, I think is the most competitive. I think Group A was the least competitive, but I think probably Group B was the second most competitive, with Sandbox and Vitality having to be decided by a tiebreaker. And then also Group A and C were both the ones that had teams that required a sub, and this was also the closest team in terms of points. I guess even overall, like 12-6 from top to bottom, whereas even Group D was 12-4. So yeah. So I guess Ninjas in Pajamas were in what I would call the second most competitive, or the third most competitive group, versus Space Station coming out of the first most competitive group. They just barely got edged out by a single point, but they did lose to Damon twice. So even if it was just a point, the head-to-head was massively in Damon's favor. Let's go back to the bracket. But again, yeah, I'm going to go with Space Station, and, maybe it's my bias coming through, and maybe it's my optimism that we could see potentially all four regions being represented in the semifinals. But, like, it's just my favorite team and everything. Like, I'm just not going to I'm not going to pick against these guys unless I think it is massively not in their favor, and I think this is a close one to call. And I should also mention, this is a rematch of the SI 2020 Grand Finals, where, of course, Space Station came out on top. But then the next year, Space Station was nowhere to be found in the Grand Finals. It was Ninjas in Pajamas versus Team Liquid, and Ninjas came out on top. So they are the reigning world champions. They have played since SI 2020. They played in the groups of SI 2021. I think that was the only time they played, though, since then, because there hasn't been very much international competition. And the other teams, I guess the two APAC teams must have played each other, especially considering they're both APAC North teams and from Korea. So they are, I'm assuming, well-versed with each other. And then Team 1, Rogue, it's possible like these teams have never fought, or these teams I think have never fought each other. Maybe these orgs have played against each other, but I don't even know about that. And then FaZe BDS. Again, I should have looked this up, but it sort of slipped my mind. I think this is a rematch from one of the SIs in the playoffs, but I'm not 100%. Okay. And so back to talking about this, since I didn't finish up. Yeah, I'm going with Space Station, but it could be Ninjas as well. I, again, think that this one and this one are quite difficult to call, with this one perhaps being the most difficult to call. This could have been the Grand Finals matchup if they didn't meet in the quarters, but I'm going to go with Space Station here. And I suppose at this point I should just do the semifinals and Grand Finals too, based on what I picked. So if my predictions come true, we will see Space Station versus Team 1 over here. And that is a rematch from SI 2021 in the playoffs. It was the first match. Am I right? Am I right about this? Yeah. They both got put into the lower bracket, seeded into the lower bracket from groups. And so I guess they must not have been in the same group. Anyways, Space Station got knocked out of the tournament by Team 1. So Alamau had his way with them. And I think it was a 2-0, but I'm not 100%. It might have been a 2-1. They lost to Team 1. Furia lost to Dark Zero. I always have to make sure I'm not getting those two mixed up. So yeah, Space Station got out of groups, but just barely. They were the second to last out of their group, and only the last team in their group got eliminated. So well, lucky for them. And then they got knocked out right away. So who do I think is gonna win that one? And maybe I shouldn't predict this way, but I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with Space Station again. Yeah, realistically, it seems more likely that Team One will win, but Space Station, I feel like they're after this day of rest, they're gonna look back on what they did, and they're gonna sort of realize their mistakes. And some of them aren't just things that you notice that you have to notice later. They are things that they were definitely feeling in the moment. But I think they can correct it, or I hope they can correct it at least. So yeah, maybe I should be picking Team One. I'm gonna go Space Station. Space Station in the grand finals, and maybe I'm just living off hope, but I'm gonna roll with it because I will be on top of the world if both of my predictions are correct and my favorite team wins. So maybe I should be not putting all my eggs in one basket, but I'm gonna do it. So in the semifinals over here, that would be Team BDS versus Damon Gaming Kia. So it's entirely possible that if things go this way and then Damon win, then we would see a rematch of Space Station versus Damon in the grand finals, and Space Station have yet to beat Damon, and it was a rematch from the groups, of course. I think probably I'm gonna go with BDS though, but I mean I might be made to look foolish. I don't know if they quite have the chops to beat another top team in a non-best of one. I mean, of course they could do it, but I think it's less likely for them to do it than for them to not do it. So yeah, I'm going to go with BDS. I think that their strong map pool is going to prevail. They're going to prevent Damon from playing their excellent maps of what I think they're really, really good at, like Oregon and Club, and then maybe one or two other maps, but they're going to have to play at least one or two of the maps that they're not as good on if their pool is as small as I understand it to be. And I think BDS can play pretty much everything. As you saw, they only have one map that's a 50% win rate, and that was Oregon, right? So yeah, and so I think they're definitely going to ban that, considering it's seemingly their weakest map and one of Damon's best maps. So I'm going to go with BDS. So that would make the grand final Space Station versus BDS. And I don't know that these teams have ever met. Maybe they have at one of the SIs, or maybe not. Who did BDS play against? Maybe they did play them. Maybe they didn't play them. I don't know. I want, because the only opportunity they would have had to play at SI 2020 in the playoffs would have been in the upper bracket, because Space Station never went to the lower bracket. I think it might have been TSM that knocked BDS down, but again, not sure. But yeah, I mean, you notice a trend, right? I'm gonna go Space Station, and look, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that they can win this whole thing. I think it's entirely possible. I think the odds are maybe not completely stacked against them, but I do think that the odds are not quite in their favor. And of course, the odds aren't really in any team's favor, given that you do have to win 3 matches, 2 best of 3s, and then the best of 5 here. But I'm gonna hope that the one NA team that made it through will be the winner of the whole thing. And call me a fool if you want. I think they can do it. I hope they can do it. And those are gonna be my predictions. So, all right. With all of that being said, I will catch you in the next video.